From the 58th floor, New York looked less like a city and more like a moving map. Blocks of glass and steel marked boundaries. Rivers of yellow cabs and buses pulsed between them like arteries. Tiny dots moved along the sidewalks, dark coats and bright jackets reduced to nothing more than shifting pixels. Victoria Lane rested one hand on the cool glass, watching the morning traffic creep along the avenue. Down there, people were late for work, burning their tongues on coffee, cursing red lights. Up here, nothing made a sound unless she allowed it to. It was the one thing she loved about height. Distance transformed chaos into pattern. Behind her, the office was immaculate. Black marble floors, a long walnut desk, sleek gray chairs lined up like punctuation. Everything had been chosen to say the same sentence. Control. The only break in the militarily neat layout was a slim leather notebook on the desk, closed, a silver pen resting diagonally across its cover. Her assistant had left 5 minutes ago, after confirming the day's schedule. Victoria had skimmed it for one name, Evan Brooks. 9 a.m. She checked the time. 8:59. On cue, there was a knock at the door. 3 measured taps, not tentative, not aggressive. "Come in," she said, turning away from the window. The man who stepped inside looked as if he'd taken a wrong turn, out of a different world. He wore a white t-shirt and a pair of blue denim overalls, the kind you saw on contractors or mechanics, not in a corporate tower where suits were the default uniform. His hair was still damp around the edges, as if he'd showered in a hurry. The faint smell of dish soap and lemon cleaner followed him in. He closed the door quietly and stood just inside, hands at his sides. He wasn't staring at the floor like most employees did when they came up here. His eyes moved once around the room, noting the desk, the chairs, the view, then settled on her. There were pale half-moons under them, the bruises of too many short nights, but there was no obvious fear. "Mr. Brooks," Victoria said. "Have a seat." He crossed the room and lowered himself into the chair opposite her desk. The overalls creaked softly as he sat. She could see where the fabric had faded at the knees and along the thighs, years of use worn into the weave. His hands rested on his lap. There was a faint, almost invisible scar along the knuckle of his right index finger. "You know why you're here," she said. He hesitated, then gave a small shrug. "Performance review," he said. His voice was low and even, with a trace of Queens in it. "That's what the email said." She lowered herself into her own chair and folded her hands on the desk. The city gleamed behind him through the floor-to-ceiling glass, framing his shoulders with light. To anyone walking past in the hallway, he would look like a silhouette cut out against Manhattan. "My father," she began, "believed that performance reviews were meaningless." Evan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he didn't speak. "Anyone can pretend when they know they're being evaluated," Victoria went on. "They can smile, say the right words, rehearse remorse. It tells you nothing." She felt the familiar cadence slip over her tongue. The words she had heard 100 times across the dinner table, repeated so often they had become doctrine. He always said, "You only see who people really are when you take away what they need most." Something flickered in Evan's eyes. Not fear. Recognition. Maybe. A memory snagged on what she'd just said. Victoria let the silence sit between them for a moment, then picked up the folder on her desk. "Evan Brooks. Server, occasionally covers the bar. Hired 22 months ago. No formal write-ups, some positive guest comments." She flipped the file closed again without looking at the pages. "You've been with Lane Group almost 2 years. "Yes, Mom." The ma'am was automatic, not deferential. She wondered who had trained him to speak like that. "Here's how this is going to work." She met his gaze directly. "I'm not going to ask you where you see yourself in 5 years. I'm not going to tell you your strengths and opportunities. I'm going to tell you one thing." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "You're fired," she said. The words landed in the air between them like a dropped glass. For an instant, nothing happened. No tightening of the jaw, no quick inhale. The only evidence that he'd heard her was a small shift in his posture, as though some invisible weight had slid from one shoulder to the other. His eyes didn't drop. He watched her and she watched him. She waited customary 3 seconds for the first reaction. Most people questioned at that point. Is this a joke? What did I do? They reached for something, anything, to slow the fall. Evan didn't. He sat very still, like a person absorbing the impact internally, the way a building sways in a storm and then finds center again. All right, he said finally. The word was so soft she almost had to strain to hear. Do you have anything you'd like to say? Victoria asked. She kept her tone neutral. This was the variable, the part that mattered. Any questions? Appeals? Explanations? He looked down at his hands. His thumbs touched once, then stilled. She watched the faint tightening around his eyes, the way his throat moved when he swallowed. He was thinking, but not about her. She could see it. His focus had gone somewhere else, somewhere far from this office and this view. When he looked up again, his expression had changed. Not broken, not angry. There was something almost like grief, there pared down to its cleanest edge. Thank you, he said quietly, for the opportunity to work here. It was not what she was used to. Gratitude was common, yes, but it usually came soaked in panic, tangled with bargaining. He sounded like someone closing a door gently, making sure it didn't slam. And, he added, the word catching slightly, if this is really it, can I ask one thing? There it is, she thought. The bargain. You can ask, she said. He took a breath. The fluorescent light above them picked out the faint sheen of moisture at the corner of his left eye, though no tear fell. Please don't tell my daughter, he said. About this. She's 6. She thinks her dad is trying. I'd like her to keep believing that, at least for a little while. Victoria felt the sentence enter her like a sliver of glass, small and sharp and entirely unexpected. It didn't show on her face. Years of practice held the lines of her expression steady. But inside, something recoiled and then leaned forward in the same instant. Most people, when she said those 2 words, fired, went straight to themselves. Their rent, their career, their reputation. Even the ones who mentioned family did it in terms of logistics. I have a mortgage. I have kids. I can't lose this. He had skipped over all of that and gone straight to a 6-year-old's belief. What's her name? She heard herself ask, before she could stop the question. He blinked, surprised. Lily. Lily. She pictured a little hand in his, the overalls, the damp hair. It was an image too specific, too close to something she did not examine often. Herself at 8, sitting at the end of a long table while her father explained revenue streams instead of reading her a story. Victoria inhaled slowly, let the air out through her nose. This is a test, she said. Her voice sounded different to her own ears now, less metallic. You're not actually being terminated. I wanted to see how you would respond under pressure. His face went blank for a heartbeat, confusion blurring the lines. Then something else moved in, something harder to name. Understanding. Disappointment. A thin, flat kind of anger. A test, he repeated. Yes, she said. An exercise my father used for years. It's effective. He stood up. Not abruptly, not in a show of temper. He rose as if his body had reached its limit for sitting in that chair. Well, he said, smoothing one hand down the front of his overalls, then I guess you got what you needed. She waited for the thanks, the relieved laugh, the promise to work even harder. The script she had seen a dozen times. Instead, he met her eyes one last time. Cruel test, Evan said quietly. No accusation in his tone. That somehow made it worse. He walked to the door, opened it, and stepped out into the corridor. The soft click as it closed behind him sounded louder than any slammed door. For a moment, Victoria stayed where she was, fingers curved loosely around the edge of the desk. The office was very still. The hum of the air conditioning, the faint tick of the clock on the wall, the distant thrum of elevators. All of it seemed far away. She rose and turned back to the window. New York sprawled beneath her, brilliant in the late morning light. Cabs inched along the avenues. A delivery truck squeezed into a too small loading zone. A cyclist cut recklessly between lanes. The same scene she had watched 100 times before. This time, the pattern wavered. When she tried to focus on the clean geometry of streets and rooftops, the picture refused to hold. It blurred at the edges, like a photograph taken with a hand that wouldn't stay steady. "Please don't tell my daughter." The words hung in the air, stubborn as smoke. For the first time in a very long time, Victoria wasn't entirely sure she liked the view from this height. Evan pushed open the door to apartment 4B with the quiet care of someone who knew the hinges would complain if rushed. The late afternoon light filtered through the thin curtains, turning the small living room the color of warm honey. It wasn't much. Peeling paint above the heater, a sagging couch, a folding table doubling as a dining area. But it was theirs. And for now, that was enough. "Daddy!" The small voice came from the floor near the coffee table. Lily sat cross-legged on a blanket, crayons spread around her like fallen petals. She looked up, brown eyes bright, a blob of blue marker smudged on her cheek. "You're home early," she said. "Yeah," Evan answered softly, forcing a smile as he set his keys down. "Slow day." It wasn't a lie, not exactly. It also wasn't the truth. But he didn't want the truth in her world tonight. He crouched down and kissed the top of her head. Her hair smelled faintly of apple shampoo. She held up her drawing, a tall figure in blue overalls, holding hands with a stick-figure child. "That's us," she declared proudly. "It's perfect," he said, and it was. Somehow, in that simple picture, she had drawn the one thing he feared losing. He glanced around the room as she colored again. The signs of their life together were everywhere. Her tiny sneakers abandoned by the doorway, the empty lunch container waiting to be washed, bills pinned to the fridge with magnets shaped like fruit. 2 overdue notices peeked from beneath a grocery list. He looked away before Lily saw his eyes tighten. "Want dinner soon?" he asked. "After I finish the sky," she said. "I'm making it purple today." "Purple sky," he echoed. "Bold choice." She grinned. "It's more fun that way." He rose and walked into the narrow kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator sounded louder today, its shelves more bare than usual. He pulled out pasta, canned sauce, the last 2 meatballs he'd been saving. "Stretch it," he told himself. "Make it work." Behind him, Lily hummed a tune from her school play. For a moment, the warmth of it eased the cold knot in his stomach. But then, as he stirred the sauce, the scene from the morning replayed. Victoria Lane, her expression carved from ice, her voice steady as she said, "You're fired." The test, the reveal, and then the worst of it, his own voice betraying more vulnerability than he wished anyone, especially her, had seen. "Please don't tell my daughter." He closed his eyes briefly. He'd meant it, every word. But now he wondered if he'd given away something he couldn't pull back. In the living room, Lily called out, "Daddy, look!" He turned, smile ready. But his eyes were tired, and she saw that more than she ever should have. Across the river, in the polished calm of Lane Group Tower, the air was colder. Victoria sat behind her desk, one hand resting lightly on her mouse as she replayed the footage. The security camera angle wasn't flattering, wide, slightly distorted, but it captured everything. Evan sitting across from her, still and composed, her delivering the sentence, his quiet, careful strength. And that moment, "Please don't tell my daughter," the slight tremor in his voice, the shield he'd lowered not out of desperation but out of love. She felt her chest tighten, though she didn't have a name for the feeling. She dragged the cursor back to the start and watched again. And again. It wasn't the obvious reactions she had expected. Anger, panic, pleading, that held her attention. It was the silence. His silence. A kind of dignity she couldn't remember seeing before. She leaned back slowly, the leather of her chair creaking. The room was dim except for the faint glow of her desk lamp. The skyline blinked in, blues and whites beyond the glass, while her reflection, sharp shoulders, pale face, hovered faintly over the city like a ghost. A soft ping broke the quiet. She glanced at the upper corner of her monitor. Internal activity notification. Footage 58 LG review 01 accessed by multiple users. Her brows knit. How? She always marked these files private. She clicked deeper into the panel and felt her stomach drop. Not with panic, but with a cold, unwelcome shift of awareness. The file had been left in a non-restricted folder. The system defaulted back after the last update. She hadn't noticed. And now more eyes had seen the footage than she intended. Far more. Someone had even downloaded it. Her jaw tightened. It was the first misstep she'd made in months. She could hear her father's voice. Already, carelessness is the first crack in the armor. She shut the window abruptly and stood, pacing to the glass. The city lights reflected against her blazer, splitting her image into fragments. In that fractured reflection, she saw something that unsettled her. The memory of Evan's voice, steady even in fear. Back in Queens, dinner was finished and dishes stood drying beside the sink. Lily lay on the couch wrapped in her blanket while Evan read a story aloud. His voice softened at the parts she loved most. When she finally drifted off, he placed the book down and sat on the edge of the couch, watching her small breaths rise and fall. Children made sleep look like a truth adults forgot how to believe. His phone buzzed. A message from a coworker. Hey, weird question. Did you have a meeting with someone upstairs today? People are talking. His heart jolted. What people? What talking? He typed back one word, why? But there was no answer. He set the phone down, rubbed his face with both hands. He didn't know what scared him more. Losing the job he barely held on to, or Lily sensing that fear. He leaned back and exhaled slowly, the ceiling mottled with the reflection of the street lamp outside. A train rumbled in the distance, its vibration rolling across the tracks and into the bones of the building. Queens sounded alive at night. Honking cars, distant conversations, and occasional dog barking. But tonight, everything seemed too quiet around him. Inside Lane Group Tower, the last employee of the security department switched off the hallway lights. Before leaving, he glanced at his monitor. A paused frame of the footage still sat open. Evan sitting across from Victoria. Victoria leaning forward. The moment before everything shifted. The employee hesitated, then clicked Save to Local Folder. A small smile, unreadable, crossed his lips. Mini cliffhanger. Someone now held the footage for reasons unknown. And across the river, two windows glowed in opposite worlds. One in Queens, lit warm yellow. One in Manhattan, glowing sharp white. Between them, the city pulsed. Two silhouettes, unaware of how entwined their lives were. About to become. The dinner rush at Marlowe House always hit like weather. Loud, unpredictable, and somehow natural. By 7:30, the dining room glowed under soft amber bulbs. Knives clinked lightly on plates, and waitstaff moved in practice sweeps between tables. Near the bar, Evan Brooks adjusted a tray of water glasses, glancing at the clock above the service station. 8:02 p.m. If he closed out quickly, and the subway cooperated, he could be home by a little after 10. Lily never slept easily until he came through the door. She didn't say it anymore. He didn't think she even knew she did it, but she always left her bedroom lamp on. He shifted his overalls and felt something paper-thin brush against his chest pocket. The drawing. Lily's drawing. He'd slipped it there before work the way some men carried photographs in their wallets. It was a picture of her mother, brown curls, a yellow dress, a son behind her, but drawn through a 6-year-old's memory, softened by love and time. His thumb brushed the folded paper through the fabric. A small anchor, a reminder to keep moving. Brooks, table 16. Chef Raymond barked from the pass. Got it, Evan said, picking up the plates. He wove through the crowd, smiling when he needed to, steady even when exhaustion pooled around his ankles. A couple at 16 thanked him. He nodded, checked on the water, asked if they needed anything else. His voice carried the same gentleness no matter who he spoke to. Servers, dishwashers, guests, even chef on his worst days. He didn't see the woman standing near the back of the dining room, just inside the shadows. But she saw him. Victoria Lane had slipped into the restaurant through a side entrance. The manager startled to find her there but too intimidated to bother asking why. She walked the aisles without drawing attention, her heels muffled by the carpet, her expression unreadable. She told herself she was simply checking operations. That was what CEOs did. But when she saw Evan across the room, steady, quiet, sleeves rolled up, moving through a sea of noise like someone who created calm rather than drowned in it, she stopped. Walking. There was nothing remarkable about overalls and a white t-shirt. Nothing exceptional about refilling water glasses. And yet, she was struck by the way he listened when older patrons spoke. How he crouched to talk to a little boy at the next table. How he thanked the dishwasher who passed him a clean cloth. It unnerved her. This simplicity, this decency. She had spent years surrounded by people who postured, negotiated, maneuvered. But Evan moved differently, without agenda, without performance. And that difference gnawed at the back of her throat like a question she didn't yet know how to answer. A burst of noise exploded behind the bar. 2 toddlers had slipped past their frazzled parents and bolted toward the kitchen, laughing in high-pitched shrieks. A server lunged for them and missed. A tray clattered to the floor, silverware skittering. Someone shouted, "Kids, stop!" as the little ones barreled through the swinging kitchen doors. Every sound in the restaurant went sharper. Knives paused mid-chop in the kitchen. Oil hissed louder. A chef reached instinctively for a hot pan to keep it out of reach. The room wobbled on the edge of danger. Before anyone else moved, Evan was already there. He slid through the doors, hands raised in a calm arc. "Hey, hey," he said gently, posture lowered so he wasn't towering over them. "This isn't a safe place to play. Let's go find Mom and Dad." "Yeah." One child's lip trembled, unsure. Evan smiled, warm, patient. "No trouble. We're just gonna walk back out together. Watch your step." He guided them out, one small hand in each of his much larger ones. Their parents apologized profusely. Evan shook his head. "They're kids," he said, as if forgiveness were the easiest thing in the world. Victoria watched this entire scene unfold in less than 30 seconds, but something in her shifted with the precision of a tectonic plate. She had built her life on the premise that people revealed themselves when pressed. But Evan revealed himself in the opposite, through gentleness, not strain. She didn't expect the impact of it. It felt like remembering a language she hadn't spoken in years. He moved toward the bar to restock glasses when his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, glanced at the screen, and froze. Not just paused. Stopped. The way someone stops when the world narrows to a pinpoint. The restaurant noise dulled as if a curtain had fallen. The neon beer sign above the bar flickered. A knife clattered to a stop on the cutting board behind him. He pressed the phone to his ear. "Hi, Mrs. Carter. What's wrong?" His voice shifted, thin, strained, trembling in a way Victoria had not heard before. She stepped closer without meaning to, drawn as though the sound itself had tugged on her sleeve. "She's burning up?" He closed his eyes. I'll be there as fast as I can. Please stay with her." "I'm coming." He hung up, hands shaking. Faintly, the folded drawing poked out of his pocket now, a bright edge of crayon yellow sticking from the denim as if Lily herself were calling out through it. Victoria saw it. She saw everything. Evan turned toward the manager, already reaching to untie his apron. "I have to go. I'm sorry, I need to get home. Lily's sick." "How sick?" Victoria asked. The manager startled to find her suddenly beside him. Evan looked up, stunned. "Miss Lane, I didn't know you were." "How sick?" she repeated. "High fever. She's not responding well. My neighbor says she's shaking." He tried to steady his breath. "I need to get there now. I'll take the train." "No," Victoria said. It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't even a decision. It was an instinct, sharp and immediate. "I'll drive you," she said. "Now." The word now cut through the restaurant like a blade. Evan stared at her, confusion and fear warring in his eyes. Victoria didn't blink. "Come with me," she said, already reaching for the door. The moment hangs between them, his world collapsing, hers shifting, and the night opens ahead, demanding the next step. The rain began as a thin mist against the windshield, soft enough to seem harmless, then thickened into streaks that raced each other down the glass. Victoria tightened her grip on the steering wheel. As she merged onto the expressway, the city blurred into silhouettes, bridges, traffic lights, the glimmering spine of Manhattan folding into darkness. In the passenger seat, Evan cradled Lily against his chest, one palm supporting her head, the other wrapped around her legs. Her fever had turned her cheeks blotchy and pink, her breathing rapid and shallow. She whimpered once, trying to curl closer. "I've got you," Evan whispered, voice cracking. "Daddy's here." Victoria kept her eyes on the road, but the sound of those words lodged itself between her ribs like something warm and unfamiliar. Rain hammered louder on the roof. The wipers fought desperately against the flood of water, each swipe revealing another fleeting view of the skyline before it disappeared again. "How far?" Evan asked, barely lifting his head. 12 minutes. She tapped the accelerator, ignoring the speed limit. "Maybe 10. A siren wailed in the distance, swallowed quickly by the storm. Victoria glanced sideways. Evan looked nothing like the man she'd tested that morning. His overalls were damp from the rain, his white t-shirt smudged where Lily's flushed face pressed into it. He rocked her gently, the motion instinctive, steady, ancient. Most men Victoria knew measured their lives in stock prices, bonuses, mergers. Evan measured his in breaths, his daughters. The light ahead turned yellow. Victoria accelerated through it, breath tight, determined not to stop. Thunder rumbled like an engine across the sky. The city felt smaller in the storm, more truthful. "She's burning up," Evan murmured, pressing his cheek to Lily's hair. "She never gets this hot this fast." Victoria heard the tremble he tried to hide. "We're almost there." When they pulled into the ER drive, attendants rushed forward. Evan stepped out with Lily in his arms as though she were made of glass. Victoria followed, the rain immediately soaking through her coat. For a moment, they stood side by side under the buzzing white canopy, watching nurses sweep Lily into a triage room. Inside, the harsh fluorescent lights shocked the color from everything: walls, faces, hope. Machines beeped with unsteady rhythm. A nurse pressed a thermometer to Lily's ear. Another checked her pulse. Another clipped an oximeter to her finger. Evan stood frozen. All motion drained from him except the way his hands flexed helplessly at his sides. Victoria glanced at him and felt a strange ache, an uninvited awareness of how deeply he loved this child. She had seen fear in boardrooms, in negotiations, in men twice Evan's size. None of it compared to this. A father trying to stand upright inside a storm he could not control. "She's stable for now," a nurse said. "High fever, but responding to fluids. We'll keep her for observation." Evan nodded, but his eyes didn't move from Lily. When they were finally guided to a quiet stretch of hallway, Evan sank onto a bench, elbows on his knees. The storm outside echoed through the glass windows, raindrops trickling like silver threads. After a long silence, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the small drawing. Lily's picture of her mother. A woman in a yellow dress, curly hair, a son behind her. Childlike lines, but drawn with reverence. "My wife used to sit on the floor and paint with her," he said quietly. "No matter how tired she was. Lily remembers her better than I expected. Or maybe she remembers the feeling, not the details." Victoria sat down beside him, leaving a respectful space between them. "She looks happy in the drawing." "She was," Evan said, "the kind of happy that makes you think you've figured life out." His breath shook once. "But then she got sick, and I realized I hadn't figured anything out." Victoria didn't offer a platitude. She knew better. Grief was not a wound that wanted bandages. He tucked the drawing carefully back into his pocket. "You kept it with you at work," she said. "Every shift," he replied. "It reminds me that Lily had a mother who loved her, that she deserves that kind of love every day." Victoria stared at her hands. She felt a tug in her chest. Sharp, personal, unwelcome. "I write," she said suddenly. Evan looked at her, confused. "You write a journal," she clarified. "Not for business. Not for analysis. Just feelings." She almost winced at the word. "I've done it since college. It's the only place I don't have to be." She gestured vaguely. "This? The CEO?" he asked gently. "The person who never breaks," she said. He nodded, not judging, just seeing. The hallway felt suspended in a pocket of stillness. Rain at the windows, fluorescent hum, the soft beep of Lily's monitor behind the door. "You don't have to be unbreakable," Evan said. "Not all the time." Victoria didn't look at him, but something in her eased, just barely, like a knot beginning to loosen. They sat in silence again, not awkward this time, just human. Two people who had collided in the middle of a night neither had planned for. Her phone buzzed. A message. She glanced down and felt the blood drain from her face. "A video of you and the child is circulating internally." Her pulse spiked. The fluorescent light above her flickered, casting her reflection in a jittery stutter across the window. She didn't notice the rain. She didn't notice the thunder. All she noticed was the viper of scandal sliding quietly out of the dark. Victoria rises from the bench, the glow of her phone sharp against her face. The hallway suddenly colder than the storm outside. The email arrived just after sunrise, landing in Victoria's inbox with the quiet brutality of a verdict. "Video circulating. Damage control needed. Emergency board meeting in 30 minutes. No greeting. No signature." Just the sharp edge of corporate fear. She clicked the attachment, and the screen filled with two images she already knew too well. Evan standing in the office as she said, "You're fired," and her carrying Lily through the hospital doors. Rain slicking her hair, her expression almost soft. Both clips stitched together, stripped of context, crafted to tell a story she'd never meant to write. Behind the videos was a timestamp from the internal archive. Someone inside wanted this. She didn't have time to feel the sting. She grabbed her coat, ignoring how her reflection in the glass wall looked strangely fractured, like the storm from last night had followed her. Downstairs, the boardroom was already packed. Suits, coffee cups, whispered judgments. The kind of crowd that fed on control and devoured weakness. She walked in, chin lifted. "Explain," one director snapped before she'd even taken her seat. Victoria opened her folder, but the voices rose like a tide. "You can't engage personally with employees. This damages the Lane Group brand. We must protect the company." "And the father? What is his role? A liability now." Her mind split cleanly into two channels, one hearing every accusation, the other drifting back to the hospital hallway. Lily's flushed face, Evan rocking her gently, the steady determination in his eyes. A father doing everything he could, and a CEO who suddenly wasn't sure she understood her own life. A board member leaned forward, tapping a pen. "Victoria, you need to remove him, permanently. Paper it as a leave of absence. Force him out quietly, and we contain the scandal. Remove him, contain him, like he was a stain, not a man." Her jaw tightened, but she nodded once because she knew how this world worked. Her father's voice echoed from years ago. People show their truth when you take something from them. She had lived by it, built empires with it, but last night had complicated everything. As the board droned on, their faces blurred into shapes, shadows moving under artificial light. Her thoughts kept slipping back to Evan's quiet, painful dignity. The way he had held Lily, as if she were the last soft thing in a hard world. She left the meeting without speaking again and went straight to her office. 5 minutes later, Her assistant forwarded the formal HR directive. Notice: employee Evan Brooks is placed on unpaid leave of absence effective immediately. One click. One corporate gesture. One more fracture in something she didn't yet have words for. Meanwhile, in Queens, Evan stood in the doorway of his apartment holding the same email on his cracked phone. The hallway lights flickered, the old bulb promising to die but refusing to. Lily slept inside, her fever finally lowering. He didn't curse. He didn't shout. He simply closed his eyes and exhaled, long and slow, like someone who had seen this ending long before it arrived. He knew instantly that the decision wasn't hers. No woman who had driven through a storm to help him get to a hospital would turn around and cut him down. She was being cornered, but knowing didn't soften the blow. When Victoria arrived at his building after dark, she looked strangely small inside her black coat. Rain clung to the hem, and her hair was pulled back too tight, as if she could restrain the chaos. By force, Evan opened the door before she could knock twice. "I'm sorry," she said, breath-catching. "The board." "I know." His voice was flat, tired. "I got the email." The hallway light flickered. Overhead, painting their faces in alternating frames of gold and shadow, Lily's drawing hung on the fridge behind him. A bright sun in a world growing dim. "I didn't want this," Victoria whispered. "I was trying to protect the company," Evan finished. "I get it." "No," she said, stepping forward. "I was trying to protect you. And Lily. I thought if I complied." He shook his head. "You don't have to protect me, Victoria. You don't even know me." Her throat tightened. "I want to. I'm trying." The flickering bulb hummed, throwing a sharp white blink across Evan's face. His hand drifted unconsciously to the picture of Lily's mother tucked into his pocket, gripping it like a lifeline. "You tested me," he said quietly. "Day one. You wanted to see who I was." His eyes lifted, meeting hers with a heaviness she had never earned. "But now," he swallowed, the words scraping out. "Now I know who you are." It landed like a stone breaking glass. Her breath caught. The hallway fell completely silent for a moment. No flicker, no hum. Just two people standing in the ruins of their choices. Victoria didn't move. Couldn't. Evan closed the door. Slowly, gently, as if not to wake the child sleeping behind him. The lock clicked once, soft but final. Victoria stood alone in the dim hallway, the flickering light stuttering above her, showing her in fragments, CEO, daughter, woman, none of them whole. Victoria tried to move through the next morning as if nothing inside her had cracked open. She arrived at Lane Group before the sun had fully climbed the skyline, heels tapping a familiar rhythm. Across the polished floors, the executive suite on the 58th floor welcomed her with its usual silence. Clean lines, cold glass. The city sprawled beneath like a grid she controlled. But today, the room felt hollow. She hung her coat, opened her laptop, reviewed numbers, checked projections, motions her body knew by muscle memory. Yet every few minutes, her eyes drifted to the leather-bound journal tucked beneath a stack of reports. Her father had given her that journal when she was 18. A leader writes her truths privately and buries her doubts there. She had followed the rule, without questioning it. Now something compelled her to take it out. She opened to a random page. Tight handwriting, bullet points, clipped emotions. Apologies she never spoke. Fears she never named. Pages disciplined into submission. Halfway down one entry, she paused. "I test people to protect myself. Not the company. Myself." The sentence chilled her. It was from years ago, but it read like she had written it this morning. She flipped another page. "I am becoming a perfect replica of him." Her breath caught. The journal sat heavy in her hands, an artifact of the person she had built to survive. A person who wielded control like a shield. A person who would fire a man and call it a test. A person who would lose him because she didn't understand the cost. She closed the journal, gently as if it were something fragile. Then she stood. By late afternoon, She found herself walking through the dim stairwell of an aging Queen's apartment building. The walls smelled of old paint and fried onions. Children's laughter echoed faintly from somewhere down the hall. She hesitated at Evan's door. The last time she had stood here, he had closed it between them. Her hand lifted, slowly, knuckles brushing wood before she finally knocked. The door opened after a long moment. Evan stood there in his worn white t-shirt and denim overalls, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His hair was slightly damp, as if he'd just washed up after work. Behind him, the apartment glowed with a soft amber warmth, the kind of light that came from a single cheap lamp trying its best. He didn't look angry. He didn't look forgiving either, just tired. "Victoria," he said, "I know I shouldn't be here unannounced, but may I come in?" He held her gaze a beat too long before stepping aside. The apartment was small, barely enough space for the table, the couch, and Lily's scattered crayons. A pot simmered on the stove, filling the air with the familiar scent of weeknight meals made. On a budget, it was the opposite of the world she lived in, and suddenly she preferred it. "I owe you an apology," she began, voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. "Not the business kind. The real kind." Evan leaned against the counter, arms folded, not defensive, just waiting. "I hurt you," she continued. "Not just with the test. With the silence. With the way I let others decide what you were worth." He looked down at the floor, jaw tightening. "I've spent my whole life believing that strength meant coldness," she said. "My father taught me that vulnerability is a liability. Empathy is a crack. I didn't question him. I became a mirror of him." Her throat tightened. "But last night, I realized something. A child doesn't see weaknesses. They see people. And Lily, she didn't hesitate to trust me, even when you shouldn't have." Evan swallowed, but he didn't interrupt. Victoria reached into her bag and placed a folder on the table. "This isn't pity," she said, softly. "It's recognition. You deserve more than the job you were handed. I want you to lead the entire service operations team. Better hours, better pay, and no one can take it away from you this time." Evan blinked, thrown. "A promotion." "You've earned it," she whispered. "You've earned far more than I ever gave you." Before he could answer, a small burst of footsteps pattered down the hallway. Lily appeared with her hair in soft disarray and a crayon still in hand. When she saw Victoria, her face lit with pure, uncomplicated joy. Without hesitation, she ran forward and wrapped her arms around Victoria's waist. Victoria froze only for a second before kneeling to hug her back. Lily smelled of shampoo and toast crumbs. A tiny sun in a dim apartment. "Look," Lily said, pulling a folded paper from behind her back. A drawing, bright colors, uneven lines, showed 3 figures. Lily, her father, and a tall woman with blonde hair standing between them like a shield. "You made me a hero," Victoria whispered. Lily nodded proudly. Evan watched the scene, something softening in his expression. Something he had been guarding for too long. Victoria stood, unsure how to step back into the conversation. Unsure what she was allowed to hope for. Evan broke the silence first. "I don't know if I can trust you," he said honestly. "Not yet." She nodded, accepting it. "But," he continued, eyes lifting to hers, "maybe we can start with this. A beginning. Not forgiveness, not certainty, just a door cracked open." Victoria felt the warmth of the apartment settle around her like a fragile promise. The first she hadn't run from in years. 3 months later, the rooftop garden was no longer scaffolding and sketches pinned to conference walls. It was alive. Real sunlight spilled across raised planters, soft patches of grass, and benches built from reclaimed wood. Wind bells chimed faintly from the railings, catching the late afternoon breeze. Children of employees raced between rows of lavender and marigold, their laughter rising above the city like a song the skyscrapers had been waiting to hear. Lily ran ahead of them all. Her shoes pattered lightly across the stone path, arms stretched out as if she were balancing on a beam only she could see. She stopped beside a cluster of sunflowers and turned to wave at Evan and Victoria. "Look, they're taller than me." Her voice carried on the wind, bright as glass catching sunlight. Evan smiled wide, unguarded, and lifted a hand in return. He wore his usual denim overalls, though now they held a badge clipped to the chest pocket. Director of Service Operations. An official title for work he had done long before anyone noticed. Victoria stood beside him, her hands loosely folded in front of her, hair pulled back by the breeze. She looked different than she had 3 months ago. Less armor, less angles, as if the rooftop had softened something inside her. "You did all this?" Evan said quietly, looking around them. She shook her head. "We did. The employees needed a place for their kids. And maybe I needed a place like this too." Below them, New York pulsed in its usual rhythm. Honking cabs, distant sirens, lights flicking on one window at a time. But up here everything felt slowed, gentler. Pocket of peace, carved out of steel and noise. "You know," Evan said, glancing sideways at her, "I didn't think this garden would actually happen. When you first mentioned it, I thought it was a gesture. Something symbolic." Victoria exhaled softly. "It started that way. And now, she said, watching Lily twirl beneath the sunflowers. "It feels like rebuilding." He nodded, the words settling between them like a quiet truth. For a moment, neither spoke. The sun dipped lower, tinting the glass walls of Lane Group in amber. Their reflections shimmered faintly. 2 figures standing side by side, not touching, but undeniably drawn toward the same horizon. "How's the team adjusting to you in the new role?" Victoria asked. Evan chuckled. "They're adjusting, slowly. I think they expected someone more." She lifted a brow. "Corporate." He laughed again, soft and warm. "Something like that. But they trust you," she said. "People trust you easily." He shifted, leaning elbows against the railing. "Not everyone." The meaning wasn't sharp, just honest. Victoria looked down at her hands. She had spent years believing leadership was measured by distance, how far she could stand above people. Now she realized the opposite was true. "I'm still learning," she said. "I'll probably mess up again." Evan turned to her. "We all do." She met his gaze. "But I want to learn with clarity. This time, without hiding behind tests or rules I inherited." He studied her face, the sincerity etched there. Then he nodded, as if accepting something he had resisted but no longer feared. Lily's laughter burst across the rooftop as she chased a butterfly into the patch of sunlight near them. She darted between their legs before circling back to her flowers. "She loves it up here," Evan said. "I built it for them," Victoria replied softly. "All of them, including her. And for yourself," he added. The words surprised her, but she didn't deny them. Wind brushed the rooftop, garden, rustling the petals, shifting the air between the 3 of them. It smelled of earth and possibility. "You ever think about the future?" Evan asked after a long stretch of quiet. Victoria let her gaze drift across the skyline. Bridges arcing over water, the city shimmering with 1,000 unspoken stories. "I do," she said, "but not with certainty, just openness." Evan nodded. "That's enough for now." She glanced up at him. "And you? Do you think you could trust me someday?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, his eyes followed Lily as she twirled near a planter of lavender, her silhouette glowing in the low sun. "Trust isn't a switch," he said finally. "It grows, like this garden, slowly, with patience." She smiled, a small, grateful thing. The sun touched the horizon then, half gold, half flame, casting their shadows long behind them. Lily ran toward them again, breathless with excitement, holding a petal she claimed was magic. Victoria knelt to admire it. Lily placed the petal in her palm and grinned, as if giving her something precious. Evan watched them, this unlikely pairing, this accidental beginning, and something inside him loosened. Victoria rose and looked out at the skyline, Lily's small hand wrapped around her fingers. For the first time, she allowed herself a question she'd never dared ask. Not a business projection, not a strategic calculation, just a quiet, human question. What kind of future are we building? The city breathed below them, the rooftop glowed, and three figures, almost a family, stood facing the light,